Catherine James stood on the wooden platform with her younger sister Rebecca, her heart pounding like a drum in a quiet room. The air smelled of dust and fear. She could feel eyes on them, cold, calculating eyes that saw them as property, not people. The auctioneer shouted their worth as if he was selling horses. Catherine gripped Rebecca's trembling hand. "Stay close," she whispered. Their father had died just weeks before, leaving behind debt he never told them about. The banker wasted no time. Everything was seized, the land, the house, and even the girls. Catherine, 22, felt her world collapse. That's when she first saw him. He stood apart from the crowd, a tall cowboy with a weathered face, blue eyes, and a quiet strength. Catherine didn't know his name then, only that he didn't stare at them like the others. He didn't smirk or whisper. He looked at them like he understood what it meant to lose everything. The bidding started. Voices shouted numbers. Catherine's stomach twisted. Who would buy them? What kind of life awaited them? Then she heard a calm voice. $100 for both. The crowd murmured. That was more than most would pay. The auctioneer banged his gavel. Sold to the gentleman in the hat. The cowboy stepped forward. "My name is Grant Xavier," he said, not to the crowd, but to the sisters. His eyes met Catherine's with quiet purpose. "You'll both have a home with me." Catherine didn't know if she believed him. But in that moment, the alternative was too terrible to think about. They rode west the next morning, following Grant to a place called the Circle X Ranch deep in Wyoming territory. The land was wild and wide open, endless grass, rolling hills, and a farmhouse that seemed well kept, if a little worn. Catherine watched the ranch children run out to greet Grant. They were all different ages with no resemblance to him. This man, it seemed, had been taking in orphans long before he brought the sisters here. "This is Thomas," Grant introduced, resting a hand on the shoulder of a sturdy boy, "and Anna, James, and Sarah." The children stared at Catherine and Rebecca with wide, curious eyes. "We'll start fresh air," Grant promised. "You'll teach the children, help with the house. No one owns you." The kindness in his voice surprised Catherine. For the first time since her father's death, she felt the faintest spark of hope. Days turned into weeks. Catherine taught the children reading and arithmetic in a tiny room that smelled like ink and dust. Rebecca tended the garden and helped with the laundry. The sisters paid their way in work, not servitude, and slowly the fear that had gripped them both began to lift. Catherine noticed things about Grant. He rose before dawn, worked long hours, and never complained. He spoke little, but every word carried weight. The children trusted him completely. There was also a wall around him. Something haunted his eyes when he thought no one was watching. One night after supper, a terrible storm rolled in. Rain hammered the roof and thunder shook the ground. Little Sarah grew feverish. Her small body trembled. She gasped for air and her eyes rolled back. "What do we do?" Anna cried. Catherine stepped forward, calm but frightened. "We need a doctor now." Grant saddled his horse in the pouring rain. "I'll ride to Kingston," he said. "Stay with her. Don't let her sleep." Hours passed. Catherine prayed over Sarah's frail body, cooling her forehead with damp cloths. Rebecca stayed by her side, singing softly through her tears. Finally, just before dawn, Grant returned with Dr. Collins and his wife. The doctor worked quickly. "Fever, infection, possible pneumonia. She's strong," the doctor said, "but the next hours will decide." The entire house stayed awake. Catherine didn't leave Sarah's side. Aunt stood in the doorway, soaked to the skin, watching over them silently. "Why do you care so much?" Catherine whispered when they were finally alone. Grant hesitated. "Because I know what it's like to be left behind," he said. It was all he offered, but Catherine heard something deeper in his voice. Pain, loss, a past he kept locked away. As dawn broke, the fever began to lift. Sarah's breathing steadied. The worst had passed. Catherine exhaled a shaky breath. She caught Grant's eye across the room. In that moment, everything changed between them. The wounded girl had survived, but something else had begun to live too. Something neither of them had expected. A bond, a possibility, something like love. But love, like every fire in the wilderness, needed tending, and Catherine wasn't sure if either of them was ready for what came next. Days passed quietly after Sarah's fever broke. The house fell into a new rhythm. With Catherine checking on the little girl every few hours, Rebecca worked with Anna to keep meals on schedule. The children followed Catherine like ducklings, wanting to be near her even during lessons. Grant watched her too, though more quietly from the doorway or across the yard. One evening, as Catherine sat beside Sarah's bed, reading from a worn Bible, Grant entered the room. He stopped at the foot of the bed, his face lined with exhaustion, but softer than usual. His hat was in his hands. "She'll be all right now," Catherine said, her voice low. "The doctor was right, she's strong." Quote, Grant nodded, then looked at Catherine with something like guilt in his eyes. I don't know what we would have done if you hadn't been here. His voice was rough but honest. Thank you. Catherine shook her head. We all did what we had to. Anyone in my place would have done the same. No, Grant said firmly, not anyone. There was a long moment between them. Catherine felt her heart quicken, but turned back to Sarah, afraid to hope for too much. Fall arrived quickly. The land turned gold beneath the wide western sky. Grant and his men prepared for the cattle roundup. Thomas was excited to go along for the first time. Catherine could see the pride glowing in the boy's eyes every time Grant taught him something new. We'll be gone about 10 days, Grant said while tightening the saddle on his horse. The children will need you, especially with winter coming. We'll be ready, Catherine assured him. We've made this place feel like a home. Grant paused, then nodded. It is a home, he said quietly. Because of you, those words lingered in Catherine's mind long after he rode away. Every day during his absence, she looked toward the road at dusk. She felt an ache she didn't want to name, but she knew she missed him. On the 7th day of the drive, a wagon approached the ranch. It was the Collins couple, but with them was a woman Catherine had not seen in years. Miss Harriet Peterson, her old school teacher from Laramie. Miss James, she exclaimed, embracing Catherine warmly. Catherine was stunned. Miss Peterson, I never expected to see you here. I've retired now. Miss Peterson said, on my way to visit my sister, I heard you might be here. I had to see for myself that you and Rebecca are well. They talked for hours. Miss Peterson asked about the children, the ranch, Grant. Catherine could tell the older woman was watching her closely as if putting pieces together. When the others were outside gathering vegetables, Mrs. Collins spoke privately with Catherine. I've seen how he looks at you, she said, and how you look at him. Catherine blushed, caught off guard. Mrs. Collins, please, call me Martha, she said gently, and don't deny it. Men like Grant build fences around their hearts, but sometimes the right woman comes along and gives them a reason to open the gate. Catherine didn't answer, but later, as she sat alone on the porch at sunset, she thought of Martha's words. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. Maybe it was possible, but only if Grant wanted it too. The cattle returned 2 days later. The ranch bustled with excitement. The children ran to greet the riders, but Catherine stayed on the porch, unable to move, her heart pounding. Grant dismounted, looked around, and when his eyes found hers, he smiled a weary, relieved smile. You're back, Catherine said. Just like I promised, he replied. But before she could welcome him home properly, 3 strangers rode into the yard. Dusty horses, stern faces, one wore a badge. Marshal Jim Dawson, he said. We need to speak to Grant Xavier. Fear surged through Catherine. She saw Grant stiffen, then step forward. It's all right, he told her quietly. Stay with the children, quote. The marshal and Grant disappeared into the house. The seconds dragged like hours. Catherine paced the porch, her mind racing. Was Grant hiding something? Did he ever need her protection more than now? When the door finally opened, she saw something new in Grant's face. Relief, freedom. The marshal tipped his hat. All cleared up, Miss James. Your Mr. Xavier is a better man than most. After the men left, Catherine hurried to Grant. What happened? She asked softly. Grant looked toward the fields before answering. They cleared my name, something from long ago. I've lived with the weight of it for years. What does this mean? Catherine whispered. Grant turned to her fully, eyes steady and open. It means, he said, I can finally build a life without fear, and I know now what that life should include. Catherine's breath caught. The moment she'd been afraid to imagine was suddenly real. What do you want, Grant? She asked. He stepped close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. You, he said, and a family not just in name but in truth, if y'all have me, quote. Catherine couldn't speak for a moment. Her world, once so broken, felt whole again. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will. Winter settled over the Circle X ranch like a soft blanket. Fresh snow dusted the fences and rooftops. Smoke curled from the chimney, and the air smelled of pine and wood fire. Inside the house was warm, lit by oil lamps, laughter, and something deeper, something growing stronger every day. Family. Catherine and Grant decided to wait until after the snowfall to make their union official. They married quietly in the small church in Kingston. With all 5 children standing proudly around them, Rebecca stood as Catherine's maid of honor, her smile shining brighter than any star in Wyoming. The preacher closed his Bible and said, What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Grant lifted Catherine's hand and kissed it gently. The children cheered, and Catherine thought her heart might burst. This place, this man, she had once feared them both. Now she couldn't imagine life without either. Life shifted after the wedding. Catherine was now Mrs. Xavier, but nothing about her daily routine changed, except one thing. She felt safe, loved. Grant had taken down the walls around his heart carefully with respect, and Catherine had stepped through one moment at a time, willing to meet him in the middle. Sarah clung to Catherine even more these days. "Is it true?" she asked one evening as Catherine helped her into bed. "Are you really my mama now?" Catherine brushed the child's hair away from her face. "I'm not replacing your first mama," she said softly, "but yes, if you want that, I want it too." "I do," Sarah whispered, wrapping her small arms around Catherine's neck. "I prayed for you, and I prayed for you," Catherine replied, holding her tightly. As the months passed, something new stirred within Catherine, and she shared the news one early spring morning. "Grant," she said, a slight tremble in her voice, "we're going to have a baby." For a moment, Grant just stared, emotion flickering in his eyes. Then wordlessly, he stepped forward and gathered her into his arms. It was a silent, breathtaking joy, the kind that seemed to echo through the halls of the ranch, through every board and beam. "We're really building a family," he whispered against her forehead. "We already have," Catherine smiled. "This child will just make it bigger." Grant rested his hand gently across her belly. For the first time in years, there wasn't a shadow behind his eyes. The past was over. The future waited. Spring brought color back to the land. Rebecca spent more and more time in Kingston with Jonathan Peterson, who had purchased the mercantile and invited her to assist in the shop. Catherine saw something familiar in Rebecca's eyes after each visit, something warm, hopeful, new. "Are you happy?" Catherine asked her one evening as they watched the children chase each other near the barn. "I think I might be," Rebecca answered, smiling softly. "Jonathan is steady, kind, he listens. Maybe not exciting like the stories in books, but real." "And maybe real is better." Catherine nodded. "Real lasts. And you?" Rebecca asked, her eyes gleaming with gentle mischief. "Still certain about that cowboy of yours?" Catherine laughed more than ever. One morning, Grant found Catherine standing alone by the creek, her hand resting on her small belly and the early sun warming her face. He stepped behind her and wrapped his arms around her, his lips brushing her hair. "What are you thinking about?" "How far we've come," she answered. "How close we came to losing everything that day in Laramie." Grant's grip tightened slightly. "I still remember that day," he murmured, "seeing you two on that platform like you didn't belong to anyone and everyone was trying to claim you." "I belong to Rebecca," Catherine said. "She was all I had until you." Grant turned her gently to face him. "You never belonged to me," he said. "You chose to stay. That's what changed everything." She smiled up at him, eyes full of love. "I chose you," she whispered. "And I'll spend every day choosing you back," he promised. Months later, the smell of fresh bread filled the house. The children grew fast, the ranch prospered, and Catherine's belly grew round with new life. On a warm night in late summer, as the stars settled like lanterns across the sky, Catherine woke Grant with a trembling hand. "It's time," she said. The hours that followed were long, but they were not filled with fear this time. Dr. Collins arrived. Rebecca stood by Catherine's side, holding her hand, whispering prayers. Grant paced and paused, whispered back, and waited with his heart in his throat. As dawn broke, Catherine's cries became a newborn's cry. "A son," Dr. Collins announced, lifting the tiny, wailing bundle into the new father's trembling hands. "Strong lungs, healthy as they come." Grant looked at Catherine, his eyes misty. "You did it," he whispered. Catherine, exhausted but radiant, reached out to touch her child's soft cheek. "We did it." "What's his name?" Rebecca asked, wiping her eyes. Catherine looked at Grant. "I think we already know." He nodded. "Jonathan," he said after Catherine's father. Silence fell, a reverent, sacred kind of quiet as the family circled around the infant. Sarah saw it first and whispered, "A new little brother." She pressed her forehead gently against Catherine's shoulder. Anna, the boys, Rebecca, all gathered close. The ranch had birthed more than cattle and crops. It had birthed a family. Years from now, many things would change. Rebecca would marry Jonathan Peterson and raise children of her own. Thomas would grow into a strong, kind man, running the ranch alongside Grant. Sarah would remember only love, not loss. And Catherine, she would never forget the day she was sold beside her sister. Because that day led her here, to a man who didn't buy a servant or a wife, but offered a home, a chance, a future. She lifted her newborn son into her arms as Grant stood beside her. Their family gathered around them. The wind whispered through the grass, and the skies stretched wide and endless, just like the life that lay ahead. Finally, Catherine understood that what had started in fear had blossomed into faith and love, a love strong enough to break every chain. This was their home now, the Circle X, the place where broken things were made whole. And they would carry that love forward for as long as the sun rose over Wyoming soil.